Bolt driver murdered by his own customer in Pattaya dominates the last week of news. Hello, everybody. I'm Adam. This is What's Poppin' in Pattaya, our weekly recap live here from Pattaya, Thailand. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Today, we're also going to talk about safety in general. We're often asked here at the Pattaya News, is Pattaya safe? I'm going to answer that question from a news perspective today. But first, we would like to invite you to subscribe, like, and follow, of course, for regular updates to our social media channels such as YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. We're on everything, basically, to make sure that you get all the latest updates here from Pattaya. Now, let's start off with our biggest story of the week. As stated, a Bolt driver that worked in Pattaya, only 31 years old, was murdered by a Thai customer who actually had accomplices in his own mother and girlfriend, who was a minor, in the past week. This was a massive story. Let's kind of set this up and give you the backstory first. So last weekend, just after we put out our last video, police found a burned body just outside of Pattaya. It immediately looked suspicious. They also could tell that the body had multiple stab wounds from some sort of sharp weapon on it, and they immediately began looking into the situation. They soon found out that the burned body had indeed been a murdered person, and not only a murdered person, but a murdered Bolt taxi driver. So what actually ended up happening, and police managed to piece all this together through a variety of CCTV and good old-fashioned detective work, is they figured out that a 23-year-old Thai man, along with his 16-year-old girlfriend, had called a Bolt taxi here in Pattaya. Now, for those of you who take Bolt taxis, they're generally not that expensive, and we were told it was a short trip. We don't know the exact fare amount, but it was likely between 100 to 200 baht. Anyways, they get to their destination, and lo and behold, the suspect refuses to pay entirely. It's unclear why he refused to pay, but this, of course, started a verbal argument, an altercation that quickly became heated and ended up with the suspect stabbing the Bolt driver to death. Now, there was a witness who actually saw the entire incident take place and reported this to police. That also helped them track down the suspect. And of course, he stabbed the Bolt driver in front of his own girlfriend. Now, what did this suspect decide to do after this situation? Well, he called his mom. And mom, for whatever reason, decided to assist him with the situation, telling him to go buy basically some gasoline from a store to take the car of the suspect. And then mom went out with the girlfriend and the suspect and burned the corpse. However, because it rained later, the corpse was only burned partially. Now, after this, mom, the girlfriend, and the suspect tried to sell the car. That failed, so they ended up ditching it elsewhere, and then they fled the area to a province up north. Police, however, were able to track them down in basically only about a day and brought them back to Pattaya, where the story really shook up not just local media, but national media also. Because it's important to think about here that often we as customers are concerned about our safety. We're concerned as tourists about what could happen to us walking down Pattaya Beach, calling a taxi, going to a place that we're unfamiliar with. That's very common and something we all think about. What many of us don't think about is possible dangers to the other side of the equation, to the taxi drivers, to the people working on Pattaya Beach, to the bar owners, to the business owners, because sometimes they also face just as many problems bringing in strangers and also with cultural and language barriers at times too. So this case really got a lot of attention on the fact that it's shown a light, so to speak, on the dangers that taxi drivers could potentially have in the area as well. Now, shortly after this entire situation took place and they caught the suspect, by the way, and his mother face life imprisonment. They have admitted to the allegations and have said they're guilty. We'll see whether or not that means that they get a lesser sentence, because generally in Thailand, if you admit guilt, that's why so often you hear people say, yes, I was guilty. It reduces your sentence in half. So we'll see if that happens. Meanwhile, the girlfriend, who was a minor, is going to face significantly lesser charges as she is a juvenile. So that brings me to the next point. Shortly after this took place, Pattaya Police, along with the Office of the Narcotics Control Board, decided that they needed a show of force to make people feel safe and confident here in Pattaya. And what better to do as a show of force than to raid nightlife and entertainment venues, which of course, had absolutely nothing to do with this tragic murder, but it is a very easy way for police to show a presence in the area. This also, of course, is tied into police trying to stop illegal drugs in the area. So basically what they did with a show of force is they raided multiple nightlife venues. They did not report anything wrong, by the way, but when they raided these venues, they also drug tested all the customers. They mainly targeted Thai venues and not venues where foreign tourists go, at least at this time. This was a bit controversial too because, well, we'll show you the pictures and some of the footage while you're listening to me talk here, but some of the officers involved in this appeared to be heavily armed. They were wearing balaclavas, masks, and looked more like, like soldiers in a war zone than maybe people inspecting nightclubs. And so this brought up the fact, in terms of cultural differences, whether or not this actually makes tourists feel safe, or with some tourists, it can actually make them feel more intimidated. Now, this sort of armed police is common in some countries like Mexico and Philippines. It's not as common here in Thailand, so it still surprises people when they see it. Anyways, we want to know what you have to think about it. So that brings me to my general conversational thought that I said that I would have here in this video. Is Pattaya safe? My answer is yes. And this is also after talking to our staff and our Thai news staff. Overall, we feel it is safe, especially with the small amount of incidents and based on the millions of tourists that come here. And random acts of violence, muggings, people being assaulted just randomly and robbed randomly is very, very, very rare here compared to many other cities and places around the world. Most of the crimes that take place here, the big crimes, are Thai on Thai. A lot of it has to do with drugs. There are people involved with gray area illegal businesses and things, especially if a foreigner is involved. It's generally because of a gray business. And a random tourist here on holiday who has no ties to any sort of possible sketchy things, are they going to be randomly attacked and murdered? No, is the bottom line. Yes, there's occasionally a case here and there, like during COVID, there was a case of a woman at the lighthouse near Ballyhai Pier who was assaulted and robbed of her purse. But again, that was an exception and certainly not the rule, and very rare. Now, what does happen here, and actually what happened in the last week or so, was a Korean tourist was robbed, well, pickpocketed really, of his almost 200,000 baht gold necklace while he was walking on Pattaya Beach. Anybody who's followed us on a regular basis is aware that these crimes of opportunity, we'll call it, especially against Indian tourists wearing gold on the beach, happen on a regular basis. Now, of course, this is usually done so quickly that the tourist doesn't even know it happens. These are pickpockets that are unfortunately very good at what they do. But there's a very easy solution to avoid this problem. Don't wear gold, expensive jewelry while walking around Pattaya. It's just not worth it. And actually, anybody who's traveled pretty much anywhere in the world knows that wearing expensive jewelry while you're on holiday and bringing attention to yourself and flaunting your affluence is probably a bad idea. Anyways, I want to hear what you have to think. Do you think Pattaya is safe? Have you ever had any sort of sketchy or problematic situations in Pattaya where you felt unsafe? I'll tell you, me personally, I've walked down Pattaya Beach at all hours of the night, and I've never personally had an issue. But it also goes back to people being aware of their own surroundings. For instance, recently in Jomtien, they raised the signs in the area because multiple tourists had hit their heads on the signs while walking around. That drew a lot of conversation because if you're aware of your surroundings, that may not happen, right? Meanwhile, the signs were low, to be fair, and have been raised to a more standard that's more appropriate for the height of an average foreigner versus an average Thai in areas where many foreigners walk. So tell us in the comments or email us at editor@thepattianews.com, and we'll kind of compile your best answers and talk about it in the near future. As always, guys, thank you so much for your support once again. Make sure, again, you like, subscribe, and follow for regular updates right here from Pattaya.